Hello and welcome once again to East of Ethnia. I am still Eric, and this week I want to talk to you about our new book. First thing about our new book, it's available for free. There is a link in the text underneath this video that will lead you to the spot where you can download an electronic version for yourself and you can read it. The book is, here's the book. Captured Societies in Southeast Europe. Formally speaking, it's edited by me, by Alena Ledeneva, my colleague at University College London, and by Predrag Cvetičanin, our colleague at University of Niš. But we like to think of it not as an edited book, but as a collective statement by the 40 people working on this project who produced the research on which it's based. The project was a project funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 program. We were looking at informal networks, their operation, and their meaning in 9 states in the region. So we had 9 partners from 9 institutions in the region, all surveying, interviewing, doing ethnographic observation, media studies, documentary studies, and so on related to informal networks. Let me tell you a little bit about what the book is about. First of all, let's talk about informal networks. That is to say, we're interested in the question of how people get done the work that needs to be got done so that they're able to lead their lives. How do they get access to things like employment, education, healthcare, to social welfare benefits, to approvals from bureaucratic institutions, judicial decisions when they need them, and so on? And the answer is there are formal institutions, institutions established by law that make it possible for people to do these things, but these institutions don't work. And so they rely on networks that they have, networks of family, of friends, of neighbors, of work colleagues, and so on. And a lot of the work gets done through exchange of favors. So the basic fact here is the reason that people rely on informal networks, and this has been true for quite some time, since states have been established in the region of Southeast Europe, um, is because the institutions that are supposed to provide the things don't work, and because they have people in their communities that they trust. So networks begin as networks of trust, but what happens over time is that there are some institutions that emerge that are able to resolve the immediate problems that they have, that they rely on networks to resolve for them. And these networks come under the control, especially of political parties. And so by approaching these networks to resolve problems, which nearly everybody does because nearly everybody needs to, the networks of trust are transformed into networks of control. And you have informal networks controlled by political parties, and the more people rely upon them to resolve their problems, the more they become dependent on these networks, and the more the control of these networks, not only over the state, but over private life, comes to be consolidated, which is why we talk about these societies as captured societies. They're societies in which the informal networks of trust have been captured by political parties and been transformed into networks of control. Let me give you a couple of reasons why this might be important. Um, the first is, I think we're talking about a new kind of state, a network state. And this is a new and I think alternative way of understanding politics and social life in the region. It's an alternative to a lot of the approaches that focus mainly on the top levels of state structures and explain things that are happening in states in the region using terms like ideology, using terms like nationalism, using terms like authoritarianism, and so on. I'm not saying that these approaches are not useful. They are useful, but they're limited because they don't tell you what's happening in social life. They don't tell you what's happening on the ground. Now, the network state, when our explanation of it doesn't really concentrate on ideology, you can say that the network state has a tendency to become authoritarian, but basically the network state has no ideology. It systematically empties the sphere of political life of content. So if you want to ask, why do people join? Why do they support a particular political party? Well, it's not because of ideological differences between parties or because there's some party that is articulating a vision of the society that they support. In fact, there are very few differences between parties. The parties that people will support are the parties that are able to perform for them the favor that they need in order to live their lives, get them a job, get something fixed in their neighborhood or their town, and so on. And this sort of becomes evident when you look at the names of political parties. You know, Every nationalist party calls itself democratic or progressive. Every regressive party calls itself social democratic, and so on. Another reason why this might be important, there are a lot of people who tend to look at the difficulties with establishing democratic political systems and democratic societies in this region as a problem of transition, as a problem of leftovers, especially from the period of state socialism. We don't think that this is a transition problem. There were informal networks operating during the period of rule by the Communist Party. This is true, but not to the same extent as now. In the old days, people used to say you had to be a member of the Communist Party to get a job, and this was partly true. You did have to be a member of the Communist Party to become the director of a company, to have a high-ranking position in a public institution. Now you need to be a member of a political party to get any job. You need to be a member of a political party to get a job making coffee, and and so on. So this is much more extensive, and this is based on the system of power and the system of inequality that has developed in the now 35 years since the end of communist states. It's a contemporary phenomenon. What else can we say about these informal networks? There's a tendency to equate informality with corruption, to say that it's something that needs to be got rid of and replaced with formal systems. We don't agree with this position. We look at informality as being ambivalent, and there are in fact some instances where we've got evidence that informal networks are better at resolving some issues than formal legal systems and institutions. So, for example, in the area of employment, where there is a need for flexible employment, where people have caring responsibilities and need to work particular hours or take times off, it turns out unregistered businesses are better than legally registered businesses at accommodating this need. In areas with mixed ethnic populations, where there are formal systems that discriminate against some populations, we find that illegal businesses, informal businesses, and informal networks are better at accommodating the diversity and need for cooperation among different groups than formal legal businesses. So there's a good deal of ambivalence here, and while informality is sometimes a source of control and corruption, sometimes it is also a source of creativity that can provide solutions from which the formal sector can learn. We ask the question too, whether the European Union and its promise of membership provides solutions to problems caused by informal control of institutions. And we find that this is also ambivalent, that a lot of reforms that are advocated by the EU are superficial. They involve changing laws but not practices, or they're reforms that are adopted and then implemented in ways that tend to strengthen the power of informal networks. And we talked about this in terms of a couple of examples. We talked about this in terms of efforts to try to solidify the independence of the judiciary in Macedonia, efforts to try to assure the independence of media in Serbia. We've talked about it in terms of informal practices like the sharing of agricultural products among relatives in families of whom some members produce agricultural projects. There is also a link, I think, to probably the biggest news event in the region, these ongoing events that have been going on for a year now in in Serbia. So there is a link to the protests. The catalyst for the protests was the destruction of the roof in this train station in Novi Sad, and roof was a product of these informal networks of control, in which parties in power gave jobs to politically connected businesses that avoided things like design approval and inspection. So there is a connection to ongoing events, but this is not a work of political opinion. It's not a work of propaganda. It is a work of research. So these are some of the things that we're doing in here. We think that it's revealed some new information about the way power operates in the state and in the region, and we think that it's offering a new perspective in how to understand states in the region. So check it out. Captured Societies in Southeast Europe. You can download it for free. The link is right below this video. Look on this page. We think that you'll find something interesting and new, and please share the link and share the text with people that you know, whether you like them or not. Thank you for your time and attention and your patience for this small promotional message.